A letter changed the world, but its author would never know it. The end of this story would unfold in a way Amerigo Vespucci could never have imagined. If you love history's mysterious stories, you're in the right place. Tonight, together, we will discover the secret history of the American continent. The dramatic story of a man who crossed oceans, sailed into the unknown, and then became immortalized unexpectedly. Before watching our video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and mention in the comments where you're following us from. Now let's begin our journey to Florence in 1454. Amerigo Vespucci was born as the middle son of a wealthy Florentine family. His father Nastagio was a respected notary, worked in the city's money changers guild, managed the financial affairs of wealthy merchants. His mother, Lisa di Giovanni Mini, was the daughter of one of the city's established aristocratic families. The Mini family had been part of Florence's social and economic elite for centuries. The Vespucci family lived in the Santa Lucia d'Ognissanti neighborhood and maintained a family chapel in the Ognissanti church. But the family's real power came from Uncle Giorgio Antonio Vespucci. Giorgio was one of the Florentine Republic's most influential diplomats and had connections that would open doors for his nephew. Additionally, Giorgio, a Dominican priest at the San Marco monastery, was one of the period's most respected humanist scholars. He had close relations with the intellectual elite around Lorenzo de' Medici, and these connections would shape young Amerigo's future. Amerigo's childhood passed right at the peak of the Renaissance. In the street corners, he could see Leonardo da Vinci's students, watch Michelangelo's apprentices carve marble, listen to Machiavelli's political debates. Growing up in this cultural richness, young Amerigo's greatest passion was cartography. He spent hours in the private library in his uncle's house, examining old maps, trying to decipher Ptolemy's ancient geography books. In the early years of his education, he followed the classical liberal arts curriculum: Latin literature, mathematics, astronomy, rhetoric, the standard education received by the period's upper-class youth. But Amerigo's real interest was always in world maps, stories of distant lands, Marco Polo's travel books. The question, what's really on the other side of the ocean, occupied his mind. In his 20s, he began helping in his uncle's diplomatic duties. In 1478, he accompanied Guido Antonio Vespucci's embassy in Paris. They worked as representatives of the Florentine Republic at the court of French King Louis I. Young Amerigo here learned the intricacies of international diplomacy, made contact with different cultures, began to understand the complex balances of European politics. This experience in Paris gave him a broader perspective about worlds outside Europe. In court meetings, he listened to Portuguese sailors' discoveries on African coasts, the Spanish' plans to travel west. In the Royal Library, he examined ancient geography works, had the chance to see the period's most current maps. During this period, there was great geographical curiosity and exploration excitement in Europe. But he was still a desk diplomat's assistant, had nothing to do with the seas. In 1485, an important transformation occurred in his life. When he began working for the Medici family, Amerigo's horizons began to expand. The Medicis weren't just bankers, but also patrons of art and discovery. They were the ones who financed Christopher Columbus's project. Amerigo, for the first time, was making contact with real exploration plans, ocean voyage projects. In 1492, when Columbus's news arrived, Amerigo was 38 years old, a successful but ordinary Florentine banker. We sailed west and reached east. We found the way to India. The news had electrified all of Europe. Gold, spices, silk. All these riches were now accessible by sea. Venice's spice trade monopoly could end. Lisbon and Seville could become new trade centers. Amerigo was also part of this excitement, but only from a commercial perspective. These new routes could create great opportunities for the Medici Bank. New markets, new investment areas, new trade routes. As financial advisor, he had focused on evaluating these opportunities. That he himself could be part of this adventure hadn't even crossed his mind yet. However, while examining the maps, drawings, and notes Columbus brought, doubts began to form in Amerigo's mind. These coastlines, river mouths, mountain ranges, didn't match any description of Asia. The India, China, and Japan descriptions in the ancient geography books he had memorized in his youth had great inconsistencies with what Columbus described. Where were the golden-roofed palaces, spice-filled markets, silk trade centers Marco Polo described? The world Columbus described was much more primitive, much more different. The native people's lifestyles, physical characteristics, languages, didn't resemble Asian descriptions at all. Was this just a matter of a different route, or something more? These questions began to occupy his mind. In 1496, when he partnered with the Berardi trading house, Amerigo had begun working directly with maritime trade affairs. Ship equipment, navigation instruments, crew needs. He was organizing all of these. This practical experience opened the doors of the maritime world to him. Now he wasn't just working on maps, he was planning real ships, real voyages. In 1499, the great opportunity arose. The Spanish exploration fleet was preparing a new expedition and needed experienced navigators. Amerigo's mathematical knowledge, cartography ability, and astronomy education made him an ideal candidate. But at 45 years old, he would make his first ocean voyage. His family was worried. Why now? Why risk your comfortable life? But he had succumbed to his curiosity. In May 1499, he set sail into the Atlantic with the fleet under Alonso de Ojeda's command. This voyage was a true baptism by fire for Amerigo. Storms in the middle of the ocean shook the ships like toys. The height of the waves sometimes reached 10 meters. Depleting provisions, sickening crew, breaking navigation instruments. Nothing was as he had read in books. Seawater was mixing with drinking water. Foods were rotting. There was danger of mutiny among the crew. Some were shouting, "This is madness, we should return home." While Amerigo suffered seasickness for days, he asked himself, why did I throw myself into such an adventure at this age? Why had he left his comfortable life in Florence, his safe desk job, and thrown himself into this dangerous adventure? At night, lying on deck looking at the stars, he wondered how those at home were. But on June 24th, 1499, when they saw the South American coasts, everything changed. The green line that first appeared on the horizon like a dream, then turned into reality. These lands didn't resemble anything he had imagined. The deep green of tropical forests stretched to the coast like a wall created by nature itself. The diversity of bird sounds filled the ears. Never-heard melodies echoed in the air. Colorful parrots flew between tree branches. Monkeys swung on vines. When Amerigo first set foot on land, he breathed in the air deeply. The smell of tropical plants, the humidity of the soil, the perfume of unknown flowers. Everything was new. Everything was fascinating. This cannot be Asia, he whispered to himself. Columbus had been wrong. This was a completely new, completely different world. The first encounter with local people was both fascinating and frightening. The natives were naked, but had no sense of shame. Their bodies were decorated with red paint. They wore ornaments made from bird feathers. Amerigo tried to communicate with them, used hand signals, offered gifts. He couldn't understand the natives' language, but could read the curiosity, fear, and amazement in their eyes. These people didn't know metal, didn't use wheels, but they lived in incredible harmony with nature. Their fishing techniques, plant knowledge, ability to read stars had amazed Amerigo. While observing them, he constantly took notes, tried to record every detail. These observations would turn into the world's most vivid descriptions in the letters he later wrote. Amerigo's first voyage lasted 13 months. During this time, he explored the coasts of Venezuela, Guyana, and Brazil. He mapped every place he saw, meticulously drew coastlines, river mouths, mountain ranges. These drawings would form the most detailed South American maps of the period. When returning home, Amerigo's mind was confused. How would he explain what he had seen? Who would believe him? He had found a new world, but this idea was so radical that its acceptance would be very difficult. For centuries, people had believed the world consisted of only 3 continents: Europe, Asia, Africa. The idea of a 4th continent would shake religious and scientific dogmas. In May 1501, he set out on his second voyage. This time, he was traveling under the Portuguese flag. The fleet of 6 ships had set out to explore the Brazilian coasts. Amerigo was now more experienced, had become accustomed to the sea's difficulties. But this voyage would be more challenging than the first. What they saw on the Brazilian coasts confirmed Amerigo's ideas. These lands were so extensive that they couldn't be an island. The coastline continued for days, weeks. In the exploration trips they made inland, they saw giant rivers, endless forests, high mountains. This was a continent, a new world. When they discovered Rio de Janeiro Bay, Amerigo was enchanted. The bay was so large that hundreds of ships could fit inside it. It was surrounded by lush green hills. Its water was crystal clear. "This will be one of the world's most beautiful harbors," he wrote in his diary. Centuries later, he would be proven right. As they advanced south, the weather got colder, the landscape changed. Tropical forests gave way to meadows, meadows to deserts. Amerigo carefully noted these changes, mapped climate zones. He noticed that stars were different in the southern hemisphere. The North Star wasn't visible. Instead, the Southern Cross constellation dominated the sky. One night, while observing the stars on deck, Amerigo made his great discovery. By calculating the timing of a lunar eclipse, he managed to determine his location's longitude. This was a revolutionary technique. Now he could calculate not only latitude, but also longitude. This increased the precision of his maps incredibly. As he made more contact with native tribes, Amerigo began to better understand their cultures. Some tribes were peaceful and hospitable. Some were warlike and hostile. The days spent with the Tupinamba tribe were especially impressive. These people had complex social structures, rich mythologies, developed agricultural techniques. When he observed cannibalism, Amerigo was shocked. Some tribes ate their enemies, believed this gave them their power. When he described these observations in his letters, it would create great sensation in Europe. People were both disgusted and fascinated by these savage cultures. Amerigo's second voyage lasted 11 months. When he returned, his bags were full of notes, maps, and observations. Now he knew for certain. The places Columbus found weren't Asia. This was a new continent, an unknown world. But how would he get this idea accepted? In 1502, in his letter to Lorenzo di Pierfrancesco de' Medici, he clearly stated his ideas. "These lands are not part of Asia," he wrote. "These are a new world, a fourth continent." This bold claim challenged the period's geographical understanding, but Amerigo was certain of his observations. The Mundus Novus, New World letter, published in 1503, had a bombshell effect in Europe. The letter was written in Latin and was quickly translated and disseminated. In Paris, in Rome, in Venice, people were reading these New World descriptions with great excitement. Amerigo's vivid narratives were enchanting readers. He had described the taste of tropical fruits, the sounds of exotic animals, the richness of native cultures, as if experiencing them. "There are trees whose leaves emit exquisite scents," he said. "The birds' colors are more vivid than the rainbow, their sounds like celestial music." These poetic descriptions, mixed with his scientific observations, offered readers both information and imagination. The letter was so popular that 4 different editions were made in the first year. Some supported Amerigo. Finally, someone who sees the truth. Some strongly opposed. This man is trying to steal Columbus's achievement. Especially Columbus's family and supporters were very angry. Diego Colón was complaining, "They're usurping my father's discovery." The Italian merchant colony in Seville was divided in 2. Some supported Columbus, some supported Amerigo. Amerigo's letter was so effective that it was copied and spread throughout Europe. Exciting descriptions, exotic animal identifications, observations about native cultures. Readers felt themselves in those distant lands. This popularity would bring Amerigo out of Columbus's shadow, introduce him also as a great explorer. While these debates continued, in the town of Saint-Dié, a young German geographer named Martin Waldseemüller was working on a new world map. This small town at the foot of the Vosges Mountains was the center of the humanist school, Gymnasium Vossagense, established under the patronage of Duke René of Lorraine. Waldseemüller here, together with mathematician Matthias Ringmann, was preparing a new edition of Ptolemy's Geographia work. He had read Amerigo's letter and was very impressed. He read this letter over and over for days, tried to transfer the descriptions to the map. This man had seen the truth. These lands really were a new world. Columbus might have found them, but it was Amerigo who understood what they were. Waldseemüller and Ringmann worked by candlelight at night, looking for ways to transform this revolutionary idea into a map. But Amerigo never learned about Waldseemüller's map. Communication was very slow at that time. Especially maps coming from Germany to Spain took years. Also, Waldseemüller's map circulated only among geographers, didn't reach the general public. Amerigo never knew his name had been given to a continent until he died. When he died from malaria in 1512, Amerigo thought he would only be remembered as a successful navigator. Even in his last days, he was drawing new maps, making exploration plans. But he had no knowledge that his name had been given to the American continent. This situation would emerge a few years later. What's interesting is that even Waldseemüller later regretted it. In the new map he printed in 1513, he wrote Terra Incognita instead of America, and recognized Columbus as the true explorer. But it was too late. The name America had now taken root, was being used all over the world. In 1538 on Mercator's map, he marked both north and south as America. Thus, Amerigo Vespucci's name was given to a continent without his knowledge. He had only shared his observations, explained what the New World was. Waldseemüller's hasty decision wrote an Italian banker's name on the American continent forever. The most ironic part of this story is this. If Amerigo hadn't written that famous letter, perhaps today the American continent would bear a different name. But his honest observations, systematic approach, and bold claims taught humanity a great geographical truth. In return, he never expected to have his name given to a continent. Every time we look at the map of America, we actually see the story of a man who transformed from a curious banker to a brave explorer, a German geographer's hasty decision, and a name that became immortalized unknowingly. Amerigo Vespucci is remembered as the man who gave his name to the American continent, but he never knew it, never saw it. Perhaps that wasn't his greatest legacy. His real legacy was his curiosity about the unknown, his systematic observation discipline, and his courage to honestly share discoveries. These values continue to be the foundation stones of scientific discovery even today. Every geographer, every explorer, every scientist follows in Amerigo's footsteps, observing, measuring, recording, sharing. The American continent bears Amerigo Vespucci's name, but he never wanted such a thing. He just followed his curiosity, shared his observations, told the truth. Sometimes great discoveries are like this. They begin with simple curiosity, change humanity's future. And sometimes the greatest reward comes to those who never expect it.